Welcome to The Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Oil prices surged last Friday, topping $57 per barrel. Reality shows that the global oil supply is tightening much faster than many have expected. Based on some media analysis, the Biden administration will limit domestic oil production. The ultimate beneficiaries are the organizations of the petroleum exporting countries, OPEC and Russia. According to Fox Business, China and India are the main drivers of rising oil prices. Their demand for oil has surpassed what it was before the COVID-19 outbreak. China's demand for oil remained high. Despite their record purchases and efforts to stockpile oil, reports show that China's oil inventories have fallen to their lowest levels since February 2020. Meanwhile, U.S. oil supplies are tightening. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the U.S. oil inventories fell to 475 million barrels last week, the lowest level since March 2020. Experts estimate global oil demand to rebound to over 100 million barrels by the end of this year. The price is expected to exceed $65 per barrel. However, U.S. producers will only get a small slice of the pie because domestic production will be severely hampered by the Biden administration. The biggest beneficiaries of reduced U.S. oil production are OPEC and Russia. They will be in control of the oil supply situation and the pricing. They are also protected from the threat of losing market share and recover from Biden's climate policy. Former President Donald Trump's Senate impeachment trials will begin tomorrow. An acquittal is almost guaranteed as 17 Republicans would have to join all Democrats in voting to convict. Testimonies will be presented in the upper chambers seeking to prove Trump's role in incitement to insurrection in the January 6 Capitol breach. Professor James Thuber, founder of the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies at the American University, studies presidential power of the U.S. He said that former President Donald Trump will not be convicted in the Senate impeachment trial, but after that, there will be a fight over the direction of the Republican Party. In reply to a question how his trial could affect the Republican political future, namely Trump's possible plans to run for president again, Professor Thurber said the answer was more complex. But there will be a battle of Republican Party lines, and the outcome of the battle is unknown as of today. At minimum, polarization and populism will continue for some time. This weekend, the situation in Burma has become even more volatile. On Saturday, many people marched in Yangon, the largest city, to protest the military coup and demand the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. The military and police have deployed water cannon trucks to stand by. The national movement reached a new climax on Sunday. On February 7th, at least 100,000 people in Yangon were on the streets, but some netizens said up to 300,000 people were there. This was the largest demonstration against the military government in Myanmar since the Saffron Revolution, in which thousands of Buddhist monks opposed the military government in 2007. The people chanted slogans such as "Down with Min Aung Hlaing," "No to military dictatorship," "Return my democracy." Min Aung Hlaing is the head of the current Burmese military government and the leader of the coup. During the march, many people were holding signs in support of Aung San Suu Kyi and President Win Myint, and many people were holding 3 fingers up in protest. This was also inspired by the movie The Hunger Games, and which has become popular in recent pro-democracy movements in Thailand as a symbol of resistance. Drivers and people on both sides of the procession honked their horns or applauded to show their support for the protest. The march took place mainly near Yangon University, where many military and police officers were on guard with shields. In Mandalay, Burma's second largest city, in Naypyidaw, there were also many people marching in protest. There are nationwide, and some protesters were riding motorcycles. The protest, however, did not end peacefully. According to Reuters, in Maiwadi, a small town in the southeast of Myanmar, bordering Thailand, local police fired warning shots into the air during the protest, and police arrested some protesters as well. Reuters also cited video on local police rushing into crowds of protesters with guns, where shots were also fired. Some sources said that the military and police used rubber bullets to suppress and disperse the crowds. Some photos taken at the scene show protesters wounded from rubber bullets. Some people picked up bullet casings, telling that the military used firearms during the event. During the protest, the Burmese people encouraged the military and police. Some of them gave flowers to the armed military and police, and even left lunch for the military and police on duty. They hoped that the military and police would support their demands and stand on the side of public opinion in matters of right and wrong. The protests in Myanmar are now growing in scale, with students, unions, and ordinary citizens taking part. One local student said it's about their future and they must stand up for themselves. And locals say that just this weekend, Burma shut down the internet on a large scale. Internet connectivity was even down to about 16% of the original rate. It was gradually restored late Sunday. Facebook and other social media are still heavily targeted with blocking. A Burmese protester said the military blockade of the internet could lead to more governance and that it could interfere with education, business, and healthcare in the future. As of Saturday, the military was still holding more than 160 government officials and associates, including Aung San Suu Kyi. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was interviewed by Fox News in the aftermath of the Burma coup. When the host asked Pompeo for his views, who has been tough on the CCP, he said since Biden took power, the Chinese Communist Party has made a series of exploratory moves that they are afraid to make under the Trump administration. Recently, the Chinese Communist Party has been intruding on Taiwan, and the coup in Burma is a substantial push by the CCP for expansion there. The CCP is showing off its power. He hopes Biden will take real action against the coup in Burma. According to Wu Zhangzhang, Taiwan expert in international and cross-strait studies, Burma is at the intersection of China, India, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. It has an extremely important strategic location. The CCP has long exerted influence over many neighboring countries, including Burma, in the name of projects such as the Belt and Road and the Asian Investment Bank. But CCP's real aim is seizing their important resources and controlling their governments and people and preventing them from moving towards democracy. It is one of their key objectives. For Burma, the country has been known as China's backyard. During World War II, as the Japanese were blockading the southeast coast, the China government relied on the Yunnan-Myanmar highway, which led to Burma to import supplies into China. The current Chinese Communist Party also expects to build an oil pipeline in Burma to bypass the U.S.-controlled Malacca Strait and import Iranian oil directly into China via Burma. Before the end of Trump's administration's first term, Pompeo visited various countries in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It demonstrates the importance the Trump administration attached to the security of the region at the time. Pompeo hoped that the U.S. would not only give economic aid to these countries, but also build allies with them. The CCP, of course, is very wary of this move. It does not want Burma to embrace the U.S. and go onto a path of democracy. In terms of the history of U.S. policy towards China prior to Biden's rise to power, at least in the last 20 years, U.S. policy towards the CCP has undergone a process of increased tightening. The strategy for U.S. national security should have a continuity plan. One of the most important documents from this office is the National Security Strategy Report, which has been published by different U.S. administrations during their terms. From this report, there are a number of principles that the U.S. government follows. These include safeguarding the United States from enemies, promoting national interest and economic prosperity, and upholding American democratic values as a model for the world. In recent years, however, the U.S. national security strategy has differed slightly from one president to the next, but in terms of dealing with the CCP, the administration prior to Biden's rise to power has been more and more aggressive. When the Bush administration took office in 2001, terrorism was cited as the most serious threat to the United States, but there was a somewhat unexpected twist. When Bush Jr. first took office, he listed China as a strategic adversary, but soon after 9/11, Bush Jr.'s policy quickly shifted to terrorism. The CCP was covered up by the terrorist fiasco and was given golden time to develop. But once Bush Jr. changed the strategy, he seemed to be unable to retract. In the National Security Strategy Report released in his second term, the Bush administration wanted the Chinese Communist Party to cooperate with the United States on other national security priorities, such as the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and environmental protection, as his main focus was still on dealing with terrorism. Therefore, Bush Jr. regarded the CCP as a participant in global affairs at that time. But Bush Jr. also kept an eye out. They believed that the CCP was already using an opaque approach to military expansion, so he also left a statement in his National Security Strategy Report. if the CCP made the wrong strategic choice, the U.S. would have to take corresponding countermeasures. Under Obama, terrorism was no longer a top priority. The Obama administration has identified the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, extreme violence, climate change, and the global economic crisis as the top national security issues to address. Its strategy towards the CCP tended to be cooperative in its first term. But he expressed concern about the CCP's military modernization. In his second term, however, he became wary of the CCP's military modernization. But at the same time, he did not oppose the rise of the CCP, but only demanded that the CCP comply with international rules and norms in all aspects. And in the Asia-Pacific region, Obama's national security priorities are directed towards North Korea rather than the CCP. Things turned after the Trump administration took office in 2017. The U.S. listed the CCP as the primary threat to national security in the 2018 National Security Strategy Report. They also expanded the Asia-Pacific concept into the Indo-Pacific concept to include countries like India, effectively forming a larger anti-communist alliance. Since then, the Trump administration has been stepping up its efforts to suppress the CCP on all fronts and has begun direct confrontation with it. However, it wasn't a smooth transition from the Trump administration to pick up the fight. Prior to Trump, although the U.S. was gradually alerted to the CCP, the overall policy was one of appeasement, with more cooperation than competition, and the National Security Strategy Report of the Obama administration's second term did not identify the CCP as a major threat to the future of the United States. This is actually very different from the Trump administration's perceptions. The U.S.-China relationship soon became confrontational on many fronts after Trump took office, and even became hostile after the outbreak of the pandemic, and the term New Cold War appeared in the press. In any case, from a macro perspective, from the Bush years when the U.S. alerted itself to the CCP strategy, to the Obama years when concern about the CCP military modernization evolved into alertness, to the Trump administration's full-scale confrontation and providing much reasonable evidence of the CCP's threat. If we follow this logic, whoever takes over the U.S. government in 2021 should continue to be tough on the CCP, or even tougher. Before we move on, I once again would like to make two requests. First, our videos are being removed and demonetized, so if you enjoy this show, please consider supporting us. Our donor box link is in the description. And secondly, the censorship continues to be excessively restrictive, and if we get shut down, it would be great, as a safety measure, if you would please sign up to our email list. Okay, let's get back into this. But so far, the Biden administration has not shown the tough stance it should have, and his national security strategy has not yet been officially reported. But from the perspective of the strategy adopted so far, it is best a return to Obama's second term. And as Biden said, America is back, but in fact, it is returned to the Obama era. Biden has driven backwards in history. According to the executive order signed by Biden, he has put up the priority of the current national security strategy on issues such as responding to the pandemic and climate change. Resistance to the CCP has not been added to the list. On January 26, the People's Daily, a mouthpiece of Chinese communist regime, published an article reporting that Biden's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, had been confirmed by a vote of the Senate. But the party media article mentioned that Blinken was a longtime advisor to Biden and had served as Deputy Secretary of State in the Obama administration, and that there was serious suspicion that Obama was draped in politics. During the Senate hearing, Blinken said something Beijing did not like. The BBC also commented that Blinken's arrival in office signaled a return to adversarialism and rational decision-making, but also a return to the dangerous Obama route, with the potential for old wine in a new bottle. Even if his tone is much weaker than Pompeo's, Blinken's words are too much for Beijing. Perhaps for the CCP, what it needs is a U.S. government that does not interfere with the CCP's development at all and only shares its interests. So it has to desperately oppose any questionable voices from the U.S. side, especially after Biden took power. In addition to Blinken, who was a highly visible bureaucrat during the Obama era, there are many more people in the Biden administration who came from the Obama administration. Even the Chinese press has said that Obama is behind the curtain. For example, in addition to Blinken, who was Obama's deputy national security advisor. Other members of Biden's team were also from Obama's White House. Biden's White House national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, served as Obama's deputy assistant to the president. Biden's nominee for U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, was Assistant Secretary of State for Africa Affairs in the Obama era. She has also been criticized by Senator Ted Cruz as being soft on the Chinese Communist Party. In addition to the above, Biden's domestic policy advisor, Susan Rice, was Obama's national security advisor. Treasury Secretary Yellen was the chairman of the Federal Reserve under Obama. And the new White House climate change envoy, John Kerry, was Obama's second-term Secretary of State. According to a December 22, 2020 report in Newsweek, 60% of Biden's cabinet nominees at the time were Obama-era officials. Biden himself had been Obama's deputy for 8 years. Many more Obama administration officials who may not necessarily hold positions in the Biden administration are advocating for Biden's policies. For example, on February 5th, more than 200 Obama administration officials signed a letter supporting Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Obama administration officials not only form the backbone of the Biden administration, but they are also playing along on the outside. A country with a weak leader but strong advisors is not a good thing. Even the media in mainland China can see that no matter how many votes Biden got in 2020, those who voted for him aren't really for him, but for voting Trump out. Joe Biden is far less of a charismatic leader as Obama. Many have noticed that Biden is also dealing with his age. He cannot hold the scene. With an administration filled with former officials, who's really in control of the White House? The federal Supreme Court voted 6-3 on February 6 to lift California Governor Gavin Newsom's ban on indoor religious activities. The court allows the California houses of worship to conduct indoor activities limited to a 25% capacity, but the ban on hymn singing and chanting may remain. The ruling upholds an appeal by 2 Southern California churches. The activities of their places of worship are restricted by the state. Religious freedom groups told the federal Supreme Court that California is the only state in the country that prohibits indoor religious activities. Previously, the 2 churches' appeals were denied by the district court. 6 conservative justices voted against Newsom's ban, while 3 liberal justices favored the ban. The 6 conservative justices pointed out that the state of California has set a 25% indoor capacity limit for retail and grocery stores. However, they prohibit indoor activities at religious sites. This double standard is discrimination against religion, and it violates the federal constitutional protection of religious freedom. It also infringes on the rights of religious institutions and their followers. Conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote in his ruling opinion, since the arrival of COVID-19, California has openly imposed more stringent regulations on religious institutions than on many businesses. The California government, on one hand, is concerned that religious activities will keep people together for too long. On the other hand, the government is fine with residents gathering in shopping centers, salons, or bus terminals. Meanwhile, Justice Neil Gorsuch criticized California's ban on hymn singing and scripture chanting. They are fighting on the grounds that religious practice is not an entertainment industry. He and another conservative justice, Clarence Thomas, asked that the ban on religious chanting and scripture reciting be lifted. Although there was support from a few conservative justices, a majority of the justices upheld the ban on hymn singing. They claim that California applies the same rule to most other institutions. They even presented evidence that singing in crowds poses a particular threat to spreading the virus. Well, that's it for today, my friends. Please like and share, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.